I am a nobody in this story, a nameless background character who somehow fell in love with the book's villain, Mike Calloway. When he was on the verge of being killed by the protagonist, I couldn't bear it and saved his life. Because the mission failed, I was destined to be obliterated by the system. Figuring I had nothing to lose, I simply confessed my feelings to Mike, and together we spent a fleeting but incredibly sweet 6 months. However, on the very last day of my life, we got into an argument. He felt I was being unreasonable and far too clingy. Mike stormed out and slammed the door in a fit of pique. By the time he cools off and pushes that door open again, he will find me collapsed on the floor, no longer breathing. My phone screen will still be glowing, displaying an unsent message. "I'm sorry, Mike, I love you." I never expected this day to arrive so quickly. The system, which had been completely silent for 6 months, suddenly reappeared in my mind. "Host, due to mission failure, you will be obliterated in 24 hours. Please prepare yourself." That cold, mechanical voice echoed in my head at exactly 10 o'clock at night, followed immediately by a countdown clock. 23 hours 59 minutes and 58 seconds. The person beside me noticed my momentary daze. "Baby, what's wrong?" he asked. At that moment, I was half lying in Mike's arms, the two of us sitting on the couch watching a movie. "I'm fine, let's keep watching," I replied. I pressed my head against his chest, feeling the warmth of his body and listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The ticking of the countdown in my head slowly merged with the sound of his beating heart. I only had 1 day left. "Mike, I can only love you for one last day." After the movie finished, we shared a kiss. He picked me up and carried me into the bedroom. Normally, we would just hold each other and drift off to sleep. I loved being securely wrapped in his arms, surrounded by his scent from every direction. But tonight, I took the initiative to wrap my arms around his waist, wanting to do the things adults do together. He was more than cooperative, even seeming a bit thrilled and secretly pleased by it. "Baby, why are you being so forward tonight?" he murmured. I breathed. I used every ounce of strength I had to respond to his touch. All the while, tears were silently blurring my entire face. "Mike, I love you so much, I really truly love you," I whispered. He kissed me tenderly and replied, "I know, and I love you very much too." I clung to him, over and over again. We stayed awake the entire night, right up until the morning light broke. My body was no longer under my control. Like a machine that had been overworked to the breaking point, it completely shut down. After managing to sleep for just 3 hours, I was jolted awake by the countdown in my head. I only had 16 hours left. Beside me, Mike was still fast asleep. The sound of his even, steady breathing drifted into my ear. I couldn't resist reaching out to gently touch his face, tracing his features over and over, desperately wanting to carve this image permanently into my heart. He and I had only been together for a short 6 months, yet it gave me the profound illusion that I could spend a whole lifetime with him. I still remember the first time I saw him. He was a troubled teenager with intense mood swings who kept absolutely everyone at a distance. Back then, I was practically invisible in our class. Because of my plain looks, freckles, and noticeable accent, I was ostracized by everyone and banished to a desk in the very back row. Through a twist of fate with the seating chart, I ended up being his desk mate for 3 years. And it was this guy, who seemed to have such a terrible temper, that quietly protected me for those 3 years. The true protagonist of this world story was his older brother, Grant Calloway. Mike was just an illegitimate child who, after being born, was sent away to a remote small town to be raised by his grandmother. Later on, when his father became severely ill, he brought Mike back home. However, this meant the family business now had 2 potential heirs, and in the original plotline, that equation only ever had one outcome. When the protagonist orchestrated a car accident to kill him, I stepped in and took the hit for him. Because of that, I was in a coma for a whole month. By the time I finally woke up, Mike had already taken care of the protagonist. The entire storyline completely collapsed at that point, meaning my mission was a failure, and the system would obliterate me in 6 months. After that, he would permanently forget my existence, and Kelly Brown would cease to exist in this world entirely. With only the final 6 months of my life remaining, I decided to just let go of everything and directly confessed my feelings to him. If the ending was going to be exactly the same anyway, I figured I might as well truly live for myself first. When we hit the 5-month mark, we held a tiny wedding with only 3 people present. It was just me, Mike, and the officiant. The ceremony took place right on the beach. White jasmine flowers blanketed both sides of the aisle as my love and I walked toward one another hand in hand. Kelly Brown, do you take the man beside you to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love him, cherish him, and walk hand in hand with him for the rest of your days? He stood there in a white suit with a bow tie, staring at me with unwavering intensity. The smile in his eyes slowly spread, perfectly overlapping with the rebellious boy from my memories. Meeting his expectant gaze, I spoke with absolute certainty, I do. During our final 3 months together, we lived like any ordinary deeply in love married couple. We cooked meals together, took walks holding hands, and even adopted an adorable dog. Then during our last month, which was just last month, we had our very first explosive argument. He felt that I was being far too clingy. It was so bad that he was still brooding over the events of those few days. We spent the entire daytime tangled up with each other again, and I dragged him along to do so many things with me. We went back to the exact spot where we first met. We visited the beach where we held our wedding, reliving all our shared memories one more time. I truly didn't expect that he would still need to go out that night. As he was getting ready to leave, I tried with all my might to make him stay. Could you just not go? Just for today, Mike, please give me this last day, okay? I pleaded. He kissed my forehead reassuringly. Baby, tonight's business is extremely important to me, I really can't miss it. Besides, I've already spent the whole day playing around with you, and you're tired, why don't you rest for a bit? I promise I'll come straight back to be with you the second I'm done. Usually, once he made up his mind about something, no one could change it. But the loud countdown ticking in my head was a constant, inescapable reminder. I didn't have much time left. My eyes burned with unshed tears, and I fought hard to swallow the sob catching in my throat. If I told you that after today you would never see me again, would you still leave? I asked. Throwing caution to the wind, I threw my arms around him. Mike, I'm begging you. Please stay. He just assumed I was throwing a tantrum and leaned down to kiss me again. Tonight's meeting is crucial, I've been preparing for it for a long time, and I can't just throw it away now. Once I'm done, I'll take you out for a drive. His company had recently run into massive trouble. It took him a tremendous amount of time and networking to finally secure a meeting with a key figure who could mediate the situation. I knew it hadn't been easy for him, but ultimately, all I could do was change my tune. Then can I go with you? I promise I won't get in your way. He tried to explain with as much patience as he could muster. That kind of environment isn't safe for you, those people are difficult to deal with, and I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to protect you. Just wait for me at home, okay? His patience was wearing dangerously thin, especially since the exact same thing had happened the previous month. But seeing the desperate pleading look in my eyes, he just couldn't bring himself to be entirely harsh. You want to control everything I do, you manage how much I drink with partners, you manage when I go racing, and I can understand all of that, I know you're doing it for my own good. And every day, no matter where I go, you message me constantly to check in, I know that's just our little couple's dynamic. But could you please stop using this specific tactic every single time? You know perfectly well I can't bear to see you upset. Kelly, what exactly is going on with you? Tell me what happened. I felt something was off with you since last month. If it's going to be like this every single time, anyone would lose their mind. Shouldn't we give each other a little bit of space? How was I supposed to answer that? I was going to be completely erased from this world in less than 2 hours. Even if I told the truth, no one would ever believe it. Just like last time, he would only think I was making things up to force him to stay. Forget it, then you should go, just remember to come home early, I murmured. I just miss you so much and I don't want to be away from you. You know how much I love you. He left anyway. After he was gone, I stayed alone in the cavernous, empty house without turning on a single light. I simply sat on the floor by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring blankly into space, waiting for him to return. The place he mentioned wasn't too far from here, the round trip would only take about 40 minutes. If I was lucky, he would have 1 whole hour left to spend with me. The countdown in my head was at 1 hour and 30 minutes. I pulled out my phone to text him, drafted a message for ages, but couldn't figure out where to even begin. Finally, I stood up and took one last lingering look at every single corner of our home. Traces of him were absolutely everywhere. Our matching couples mugs, the brown rug we had spent forever picking out together, the antique vase he bought for me at an auction, the birthday present I had given him. It was all about to slowly turn into ashes. When my eyes landed on the portrait I had drawn of him as a teenager, a sudden overwhelming urge to hear his voice washed over me. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. Was he afraid I would interrupt him? He must have specifically turned off his phone. But Mike, I only have 50 minutes left. I sat in the bedroom hugging his pillow, waiting and waiting, but he never came back. With a sharp ding, the countdown hit 0. My consciousness began to scatter, and my eyelids grew impossibly heavy and slid shut. In my hazy final moments, I thought I heard the sound of the front door opening, followed by his voice. I had written that letter a long time ago and tucked it into the second drawer of his study desk. He had just never noticed it. The very last message left on my phone was also for him. I'm sorry, Mike. I love you. He regretted it a mere 10 minutes after walking out the door. It was just a business deal. How could that possibly compare to Kelly? He could always make more money, but how could he just walk away when his lover was so clearly heartbroken? But the car was already en route. He decided he would just make a brief appearance to show his face and then head straight back home. If the deal fell through, he would just accept the loss. It only took him 30 minutes to wrap everything up and start rushing back. Passing by a flower shop, he stopped and bought a bouquet of champagne-colored lisianthus. Those were her absolute favorite flowers. He promised himself, the second I get home, I will apologize to her, whatever it takes to make it right. Doing all of this took up 40 minutes. He desperately wanted to call her to tell her he was on his way back and had brought her favorite flowers. But the moment he pulled his phone out, a drunk pedestrian stumbled into him, knocking it right out of his hand. It hit the pavement, the screen shattering into a million pieces, completely dead. In the exact second the phone shattered, he felt a sudden terrifying drop in his chest, as if his heart had plummeted. It felt like something vital was slipping away from him. He had no choice but to race home as fast as humanly possible. The closer he got to the house, the more intense the overwhelming sense of dread became. This particular road rarely had traffic, and it had been completely clear on the way there, but now it was suddenly gridlocked. Cars were jammed bumper to bumper, only inching forward every few minutes. The panic and palpitations in his chest amplified to an unbearable level. He abruptly abandoned the car and decided to make a run for it. He took countless shortcuts along the way, sprinting like he was back in high school competing on the track. He pushed himself to the absolute limit, desperate for nothing else but to see her. 10 minutes later, he arrived at their front door. He hastily straightened his disheveled clothes and tried to calm his ragged breathing. Thankfully, he hadn't dropped the flowers while sprinting. Taking a deep breath to push down the bizarre gnawing anxiety in his gut, he pushed the door open. Baby, I'm so sorry I'm late, but look, I brought you lisianthus. As he opened the door, he saw her lying motionless on the floor. The warm yellow light spilled over her body. He assumed she had just fallen asleep while waiting for him. He walked over carefully, intending to wake her gently so she could go sleep in their bed. But as he drew near, he realized the person before him had an ashen face and lips completely drained of color. She was no longer breathing. She looked like a withered flower, resting silently on the ground. The phone next to her was still glowing. It displayed a message meant for him that she hadn't managed to send in time. I'm sorry, Mike. I love you. After I died, my soul didn't dissipate immediately. Instead, I drifted in the air above. Watching him walk in, my first instinct was to rush over and hug him, ready to complain, "What took you so long? I waited forever today, you owe me big time." It was only when my body phased right through his that the reality slowly hit me. I was already dead. My existence had been entirely wiped from this world. I watched as he, with a completely blank, stunned expression, scooped up my body and carried me toward the bedroom. His face was devoid of emotion, yet I understood exactly what he was feeling. He bathed me, dressed me in pajamas, and then lay down on the bed beside me. Just like any other normal night, he pulled me securely into his embrace. He kissed my forehead first, and then pressed his lips to my pale ones. "Baby, you must be tired today, go to sleep early, good night." It was all my fault, but I bought you flowers, you aren't going to stay mad at me, right? For the first few days, he acted as if nothing had happened at all. He talked to me every single day, washed my face, and brushed my teeth. At night, the two of them slept in each other's arms, just as though I had never left. I hovered in the air, watching it all unfold. It felt as though someone had carved a massive hole in my heart, and freezing wind was howling straight through it. It wasn't until the 7th day that all his repressed emotions violently erupted. My body had already begun to decompose. He completely ignored the decay, clutching my body tightly while repeatedly sobbing out his love and devastating remorse. "I'm so sorry. If I had just noticed something was wrong earlier, if I had just believed what you told me, would you still be here? I was wrong. Please come back, I'm begging you. I promise I'll never do it again." He slapped himself across the face, over and over again. "Kelly, please, just open your eyes and look at me one more time, okay? I will never leave you behind ever again. I'll take you with me everywhere, please." After meticulously arranging my funeral, he purchased the burial plot right next to mine. On a mild, pleasant afternoon, he lay down on the bed with a completely serene expression. He swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills. In his hands, he held my old favorite cat-shaped throw pillow and the letter I had left for him. "Don't be afraid, I'm coming to find you. We promised we would be together. Actually, you've waited long enough. I'll run to catch up with you." Watching this horrifying scene, a sudden wave of severe dizziness overtook me. It felt as though my entire soul was being forcefully vacuumed into a tiny, cramped container. When I finally recovered and opened my eyes, I found myself back in high school. Right at the exact place where I had first met him. Except this time in his world, the person known as Kelly Brown no longer existed. I was still in my spirit form. At this point in time, he was 16 years old, wearing a white short-sleeved shirt with his school uniform jacket casually draped over his shoulders. He sat in the very last row, his head perpetually buried in his arms on the desk. The moment the dismissal bell rang, a few rough-looking swaggering boys strolled in through the back door of the classroom. They rapped their knuckles against his desk. "Let's go, usual place tonight." He lifted his head, gave them a brief look, stood up from his chair, pulled on his jacket, and walked out. I had nowhere else to go, so I could only drift aimlessly behind him. "Mike, I miss you so much." But I could only look at him, forever unable to touch him. Was this the system's ultimate punishment? He had grown up in this small town. His mother passed away when he was 7, leaving him and his grandmother to rely solely on each other. They were poor, but he was academically brilliant. His entrance exam scores had been so high that the school, knowing his family's financial situation, granted him one of their very rare tuition waivers. Over this particular summer break, his grandmother had fallen severely ill, and the medical bills far exceeded what their insurance would cover, putting an agonizing amount of pressure on him. So he slept through the days at school and fought in underground fighting rings at night. The money came fast, but the injuries he sustained were brutal. That night, some classmates had pranked me by locking me inside a storage closet until a night shift security guard found me during his rounds. Not long after walking out of the school gates, I stumbled upon him lying in the middle of the road, absolutely covered in horrifying injuries. I was terrified he was actually dead. I tentatively stepped closer and lightly poked his exposed arm. "Hey, are you still alive?" I was petrified. I had heard all the rumors about his reputation and worried that someone had come seeking revenge and nearly beaten him to death. The figure lying on the ground didn't make a single sound. Just as I was about to dial 911, a hand shot out and clamped onto the hem of my pants. A weak but fierce voice growled, "Not dead." It took a colossal amount of effort for me to drag him all the way to the doorstep of a nearby private clinic. And then I ran away. His seat remained empty for 2 whole days before he finally reappeared in class. Without a word, he dragged his desk straight from the doorway side all the way over to the window seat, right next to mine. I stared at him in utter confusion. He scowled, his expression incredibly fierce. "Don't think I didn't recognize you. You bolted faster than a rabbit that night." My spine was trembling, but I forced myself to argue back, "But I still managed to get you to the clinic door. It's not like I'm the one who beat you up." The bruises on his face hadn't faded yet, and he had 2 bandages slapped haphazardly over his cuts. He flashed me a rogue, crooked grin and said, "What are you so scared of? It's not like I came here to exact revenge on you." I desperately tried to sit up straight, but I only ended up ducking my head even lower. The truth was, I really didn't want to associate with someone like him. I just wanted to get through high school as fast as possible and start fresh at college. Sensing my blatant fear, He didn't say anything else. He slumped forward onto his desk, cracked a textbook open down the middle to drape over his head, and went right back to sleep. It was only after becoming his deskmate that I realized he wasn't nearly as terrifying as the rumors made him out to be. During a break, while I was walking to the restroom, I was cornered by the people who constantly bullied me. Led by a guy named Derek, there were several large, intimidating guys who weren't much to look at. "What is that smell on you, seriously? It's like you just crawled straight out of a cold storage locker at the docks. You shouldn't even be called Kelly, just call yourself Doc Girl," the boys jeered, bursting into raucous laughter. Suddenly, there was a deafening crash. The restroom door was violently kicked open, and he stepped out, his face dark as a thundercloud. "What did you just call her?" Derek's expression crumbled instantly. He stammered, too terrified to speak clearly. He stalked forward, closing the distance until he was right in front of him, staring down at him with menacing authority. "I said repeat it, what did you just call her?" Derek forced a nervous laugh and said, "Mike, she just works at that fish processing plant down by the docks, right? Is there really a need to get this mad?" The very next second, he drove his foot straight into Derek's stomach. "If I ever catch any of you messing with Kelly again, I'll beat you every single time I see you." They all knew exactly how dangerous he was in a fight and didn't dare retaliate. His gaze shifted over to me. "Hit him back." I was so traumatized by their constant bullying that I was paralyzed, afraid to move a muscle. He strode over, grabbed my hand, and forced me to slap Derek viciously across the face. "Did you remember that feeling? Next time someone tries to bully you, you hit them back exactly like that. Don't be afraid. You have to stand up for yourself, do you hear me?" My fingers were completely numb, and a glaring, red handprint blossomed on Derek's cheek. As I snapped out of my sheer shock, he was still staring at me with piercing intensity. I hurriedly blurted out, "I understand." From that moment on, a subtle unspoken shift occurred in our relationship. We weren't exactly close, but the freezing distance between us thawed considerably. And those bullies never dared to harass me again. I knew it was entirely because of him. After noticing he frequently skipped breakfast, I started secretly buying a cup of coffee and a sandwich, slipping them into the bottom shelf of his desk. Whenever he found them, he wouldn't say a single word, he'd just polish off the breakfast in 2 bites. And then immediately go back to sleeping on his desk. If my memory serves me right, today was the exact day I would find him battered and bleeding on the road. I frantically trailed behind him. Since I didn't exist in this world anymore, what was going to happen to him? He was being hauled out of the fighting arena by 2 other guys, an arm draped over each of their shoulders. "Mike, are you absolutely sure you don't need to go to the hospital for this?" "I don't need it. They're just minor injuries." After walking for a bit, he waved the 2 of them off and continued staggering toward his house entirely alone. Watching his swaying, unsteady footsteps, my immediate instinct was to rush up and support him. But my hands just phased right through his body once again. I stared blankly down at my own transparent hands. Now that I was closer, I could fully see the horrifying extent of the trauma to his face. He was gravely injured, with a steady stream of blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. As he dragged himself forward, he suddenly pitched forward and collapsed rigidly onto the pavement. The scene aligned perfectly with the memory carved into my mind. "Mike!" I screamed. But I still wasn't able to catch him. I was already a ghost, so why was my heart still breaking this painfully? Seeing those wounds felt like a knife violently plunging into my heart, slicing me to pieces over and over again. I desperately tried to scoop him up off the ground, but it was physically impossible. I just kept phasing through him, again and again. "Mike, please wake up. You're almost home, I'm begging you to hold on just a little longer," I sobbed. "Can somebody please come by? I'm begging anyone, please save him." I was forced to watch helplessly as he lay there on the freezing pavement for the entire night. Halfway through the night, a light drizzle began to fall, the icy drops splashing relentlessly against his still body. The pool of blood around him slowly began to expand. Because there was no Kelly Brown left in this world to appear and drag him into a clinic for medical help. A suffocating sense of powerlessness completely engulfed me. The man I loved was dying right in front of me, and I couldn't even touch him. When he had looked down at my dead body, had he felt this exact same agonizing despair? It wasn't until the early hours of the following morning that a sanitation worker finally spotted him and dialed 911. He remained comatose for 3 solid days, battling a persistently raging fever. I hovered endlessly in the air, utterly powerless, able to do nothing but stay by his side. In the middle of the night, I draped myself over the edge of the hospital bed and drifted into a hazy sleep. Technically, I didn't actually need to sleep anymore, but the loneliness was maddening. I spent every single day talking to myself, knowing I would never get a response. In my groggy state, I suddenly felt a pair of hands gently stroke the top of my head. I bolted upright and immediately stared at the person lying in the bed. He was awake. He was gazing at me through half-lidded eyes, a faint, tender smile lingering on his lips. Overwhelmed with joy, I threw myself at him, reaching out to touch him. "Mike, can you finally see me?" I cried. The touch I had just felt was undeniably real. He forced his heavy arm up and gathered me securely into his embrace. He affectionately nuzzled his chin against the top of my head. "Baby, thank God, I finally found you again," he murmured. My eyes burned intensely, and I broke down, sobbing quietly into his chest. This was the Mike from my previous life, the man who had loved me so deeply and for so long. He patted my back with incredible gentleness. "Sure, I caught up to you, didn't I? I promised you I wouldn't leave you all alone. From now on, I will stay with you, no matter where we go." Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably, completely blurring my vision. I sniffled and lifted my head to look at him again, desperate to make absolutely certain he had truly returned to me. But then I realized, he was still lying there on the hospital bed, his face deathly pale, his eyes clamped shut. An 4-drip was still taped securely to the back of his hand. Everything that just happened had been a cruel hallucination. He hadn't woken up. He hadn't come back to me, and he certainly couldn't see me. I remained nothing more than an invisible phantom. He spent a full week confined to the hospital bed. The second he recovered just enough to stand, he immediately checked himself out. He had won a substantial amount of money from that brutal fight, enough to cover 6 months' worth of his grandmother's medical bills. Which meant he could finally allow himself a brief moment to breathe. He returned to school and relentlessly caught up on all the coursework he had missed. He was naturally intelligent and highly perceptive, meaning he absorbed information incredibly fast. But he was plagued by a constant feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. It felt like a crucial piece of his life was missing. The bottom shelf of his desk was empty save for 2 random textbooks, and the seat right next to him was completely vacant. Normally, he absolutely despised having anyone sit next to him. But bizarre, fragmented scenes kept flashing relentlessly through his mind. Someone was carefully and tenderly applying medicine to his wounds. Someone was lending him perfectly neat and beautifully written class notes. Yet the face in those memories was always hopelessly blurred. He poked the back of the male student sitting directly in front of him. "Do you know if anyone has ever shoved things into the bottom shelf of my desk before?" The boy gave him a highly confused look and shook his head. "I have no idea. But I seriously doubt anyone would dare try that." His temper wasn't actually that horrible, but he looked incredibly intimidating and rarely spoke, making everyone assume he was impossible to get along with. Over time, everyone had grown terrified of him. "That's so weird," he muttered. Then he asked, "Is there anyone in our class with the last name Brown?" "Yeah, there is." A few minutes later, a girl with short hair walked over and asked, "Mike, what did you need to see me about?" "Are you Olivia Brown?" he asked. The girl nodded and said, "Yeah, that's me." She was the sole person in the entire class with the last name Brown. But he only needed to look at her for a single second to know with absolute certainty that she wasn't the person he was looking for. Who on earth was it? I sat right beside him, watching his frantic, confused actions, my resolve violently wavering once more. Because previously, the other person in this class with the last name Brown had been me. And the person who sneaked things into his desk was also me. During study hall, unable to find the answers he craved, he couldn't stop himself from staring blankly into space. His scratch paper was entirely covered with the word Brown scribbled over and over again. It was the sole detail he could actually remember. I extended my transparent finger and traced a name right in front of Brown. Kelly. Kelly Brown. "Mike, I desperately want you to remember me, but I am equally terrified that you will. If you remember me, but we remain permanently separated by life and death, wouldn't that just be an unimaginably cruel torture for you? What are we supposed to do?" When classes ended, I continued to follow him. First, he wandered aimlessly around the school grounds for a while, then, as the sun began to set, he took a slow, meandering walk off campus. After weaving through 7 or 8 different streets, he suddenly froze in his tracks the second he turned onto the road leading toward the old docks. A surge of intense anxiety seized me, because this specific neighborhood was the place I used to know better than anywhere else. A line of grayish-white warehouses hugged the riverbank, cargo trucks were perpetually parked near the entrances, and the air was thick with the overpowering scent of seawater mixed with frozen raw fish. The warehouse tucked away at the very end, marked by a faded blue sign, was exactly where my family worked. My family lived on the 4th floor of the dilapidated apartment complex situated right near the docks. Not far from the base of the building was the fish processing warehouse. Every single day after school, I would go down there to help out, aggressively sealing up ice-packed crates or slapping labels onto plastic shipping trays. The air there was permanently stagnant, heavy with a salty fishy stench that clung stubbornly to my clothes, no matter how many times I washed them. And because of that exact smell, I was ruthlessly mocked at school. When I had once brought the teasing up to him, he just frowned deeply and said, "What smell?" "That's just the smell of the ocean." If they can't recognize that, it just means they've never actually seen the real world. I had pressed him further, asking, "What does the real world smell like then?" He suddenly dipped his head down, buried his nose directly into the nape of my neck, and inhaled a soft, deep breath. His voice was pitched incredibly low. "It smells clean." He stopped in front of a tiny seafood market right near the edge of the docks. "What's fresh today?" he asked. The owner looked up from her massive freezer and replied, "Cod, and we just got a fresh shipment of red snapper in." A wave of disappointment washed over me. He was literally just here to buy fish. He hadn't recognized the place at all. I desperately wanted to float over and check on my old apartment building, but an invisible tether constantly restricted me from drifting too far away from him. After paying the owner, he took the white styrofoam cooler packed with fish, and asked seemingly casually, "Ma'am, by any chance, did a family with the last name Brown ever live around here? Working over at the processing warehouses?" The owner simply shook her head. "This whole dock area has a massive turnover, laborers come and go constantly. I've been selling fish down here for years, and I definitely don't remember any family named Brown." He didn't push the matter any further, he just grabbed the cooler and started walking back. I stood frozen in place, a tight painful knot forming in my chest. He must have remembered something. Over time, he embarked on a manic crusade to track down a person who didn't even exist. Everyone started looking at him like he had lost his mind. But because they were all still deeply afraid of his fighting skills, no one had the courage to say anything to his face. I shadowed him as he visited every single place we used to spend time together. Standing in front of the food truck right near the school, he absent-mindedly ordered 2 portions of fries. He even asked for extra sauce on one of them, even though he absolutely loathed that specific flavor. Whenever he passed a stationery store, he would wander into the sketchpad aisle and buy a drawing pad along with several pencils. Even though he had never drawn a single thing in his entire life. During class, he would spend hours staring blankly at the empty chair beside him. He was missing a person who always sat with perfect posture, diligently taking notes through every lecture. I was becoming clearer and clearer in his fragmented memories. But he was still completely unable to recall my name, nor could he picture my face. An entire semester flew by, and he remained entirely devoid of the answers he was so desperately seeking. His grades, however, had plummeted dramatically. His mental and physical state was visibly deteriorating, with dark heavy bags permanently bruised under his eyes. "Mike, are you absolutely sure you're okay lately? You look completely possessed trying to find this person," a classmate finally asked. He shook his head dismissively, insisting he was perfectly fine. "What's the name of the person you're looking for? Any defining features? Where have they been seen before? If we all help you look, it'll go way faster," they offered. He dug through the scattered scenes flashing through his mind. "She would always be so incredibly gentle when putting medicine on my cuts. She's really thin and small, but her grip is surprisingly strong. Her voice is gorgeous, she always helps correct my mistakes on homework, and she loves to draw." The boys stared at him in utter bewilderment. They had absolutely no idea who he was describing. Could it be some girl from another town that you just bumped into near the school? If she went here, there's no way we wouldn't know who she was, they reasoned. He argued stubbornly, but I can clearly remember exactly how she looked sitting right next to me. She would bring me breakfast, and I taught her how to play volleyball, and I would run with her. Everyone was completely speechless. The idea that he was capable of treating someone with such tenderness was unbelievable to them. Eventually, yielding to everyone's urging, he went to see a psychological counselor. Under the counselor's guidance, he picked up a pencil and managed to sketch out my general appearance. It was close, but still missing something essential. But nobody had ever seen the girl in the drawing, and the school's security footage confirmed I had never set foot on campus. He finally surrendered to the fact that I was just someone who didn't exist. Just a phantom he had conjured up in his own mind. Once he gave up the search, I gently rested my transparent head on the desk beside him. I shamelessly drank in the sight of the younger version of the man I loved. Maybe this was for the best. Forgetting was far kinder than the agony of never being able to see me again. His life gradually returned to normal. Whenever he ran low on cash, he fought in the underground rings, and as soon as he had saved up enough for his grandmother's medical bills, he went right back to school to focus on his studies. That is, until the day the hospital called to inform him that his grandmother's condition had taken a devastating turn for the worse, and that she likely wasn't going to survive. His sole remaining family member in the world was abruptly torn away from him. In my past life, I had been standing right by his side, supporting him as he accompanied her through her final moments. But this time, he was entirely alone. He stood a silent vigil beside his grandmother's hospital bed for the entire night. This person who had always been so fierce and unyielding now possessed a back that looked terrifyingly fragile and on the verge of shattering. I was desperate to pull him into a hug, to reassure him, "Mike, I'm still right here with you." But my hands just kept slicing harmlessly through his body, incapable of offering him even a single embrace. When he walked out of the hospital doors, muscle memory immediately guided him to a specific location. It was as though walking in that direction would automatically provide him with the answers he craved. There was a small creek running just behind the school, with a narrow dirt path tracing its edge. In the early morning, it was completely deserted. I had always loved studying there, sitting beneath the shade of a large tree and enjoying the cool, refreshing breeze. Later on, it became our secret hideout, a sanctuary where absolutely no one would ever interrupt us. Since I had traveled back to this timeline, he had never once set foot here. I rushed forward, completely overwhelmed with excitement. This was the exact spot where I had carefully tended to his wounds when he was hurt. This was where I had drawn that sketch of him. Even our very first kiss had taken place right here. "Mike, look at this stone bench, it looks exactly the same as it used to," I pointed out. "And the creek is still just as crystal clear," I added. I turned back to look at him. He was still dressed in his school uniform, standing tall and elegantly composed. Yet his face was frozen in an expression of sheer unadulterated shock as he stared directly at me. "You?" he breathed. He could see me. But he was the absolute only person in the world who could. The moment that realization washed over me, I completely froze in place. I had absolutely no idea how I was supposed to act around him now. After all, he still hadn't fully recovered his memories from our previous life. He stared at me in a daze, as though trying to bore holes straight through my soul. This went on for a solid 5 minutes. Finally, with his voice trembling violently, he asked, "Are you the person I've been looking for?" I stepped forward and gently wrapped my arms around him. "I am," I answered softly. "My full name is Kelly Brown." He abruptly broke down into loud, desperate sobs and crushed me against his chest with terrifying force. Scalding tears cascaded onto the back of my neck. They seared their way straight into my heart. His voice was thick with agonizing heartbreak as he said, "I remember you, but it's completely fragmented. But I looked for you for such a long, long time. Why did you wait until now to show up?" I coaxed my young lover with infinite patience. "I've actually been right here the entire time. It's just that before now, you weren't able to see me." I stayed faithfully by his side for the entire day while he rambled on, asking me an endless stream of questions. "Are you actually real?" he asked. "As long as you believe in me, I'm real," I answered. "I came into this world specifically for you, and you are the only one who can ever see me." He nodded with solemn sincerity and said, "I believe it. I can hug you, I can touch you, and I completely trust my own heart. Because the second I saw you, it started racing like crazy." After that, we headed back to school together, and I got to experience campus life all over again. Whenever he was bored, he would just strike up a conversation with me. But to anyone else watching, it looked like he had suffered a complete mental breakdown. He was talking directly to thin air and performing a variety of highly bizarre actions. Someone tried to suggest he should go back to the psychological counselor. He shot the guy a furiously deadly glare, and the student instantly scrambled away in terror. When no one else was around, I secretly scolded him, "From now on, you are forbidden from talking to me when other people are watching. Do you understand?" He frowned petulantly. "But I can't help it. You're standing right in front of me, and I just desperately want to look at you. And when you're not right in front of me, I'm terrified you've suddenly vanished forever." I completely understood where he was coming from, but I absolutely refused to let him become the target of everyone else's judgment and weird looks. He was supposed to be a brilliant, spirited young man, the brightest star in any crowd, not someone branded with the label of having psychological issues. I hardened my face and pretended to be genuinely furious. "If you keep acting like this, next time I'll just turn completely invisible and hide so you have to search for me all over again. After all, you're the only one who can see me anyway." He verbally surrendered, muttering, Okay, fine." But in reality, he still constantly sneaked glances at me, his eyes drifting over to me at every available opportunity. He was smart enough to keep his mouth shut though. The storyline advanced much earlier than expected, and his biological father tracked him down. The absolute second he laid eyes on his father, all of his memories from his past life flooded back to him. But he blatantly rejected his father's invitation. He refused to return to that toxic household, and he wanted absolutely nothing to do with the vicious grudges and rivalries from our previous life. Because of my presence, he had entirely broken away from his original destiny, completely abandoning the book's predetermined plotline. He refused to meddle in Grant's romantic affairs, and he had zero interest in fighting for a share of the family fortune. He simply wanted to live a quiet, uncomplicated life. He wanted to stay with me and make up for all the tragic regrets we harbored from our previous life. After graduation, he was accepted into a highly prestigious university and finally left the small town behind. He rented a small apartment off campus. Absolutely everything inside the apartment was bought in pairs. Outsiders thought he was incredibly strange. He was brilliantly talented, yet he always isolated himself completely. He ruthlessly rejected every single person who tried to pursue him romantically, and he had long since grown entirely numb to the weird looks people gave him. Because as long as I was still by his side, he had everything he needed. I would never age. I remained permanently frozen in the exact state I was in when I died. But my spirit form was steadily accumulating more and more limitations, growing weaker by the day, forcing me into a deep slumber at the exact same time every single day. Whenever that happened, he would immediately drop absolutely everything he was doing and lie down next to me. Just like always, the two of us would drift off to sleep wrapped securely in each other's arms. I have no idea how long these peaceful days can actually last. I have no idea exactly when I will finally vanish forever. And I have no idea what he will look like when he finally grows old. The future is a total, terrifying unknown. But there is one thing I know with absolute certainty. In this exact moment, we are completely, deeply happy. And that is more than enough.